It was almost midnight when you reached for the kitchen light, and the second the bulb flickered on, the floor came alive. Roaches breaking for the shadows under the cabinets, a column of ants threading along the edge of the baseboard, and then the thing you tried not to see, a gray streak vanishing behind the range. The exterminator already has your number saved, and he wants another $300 to make his fourth visit since January. But sitting on the second shelf of your bathroom cabinet, behind the cough syrup, there is a brown plastic bottle that cost 98 cents. That single bottle will deal with 20 different household invaders, roaches, ants, bed bugs, fleas, mice, and more than a dozen others. The Department of Agriculture wrote all of this down in 1939 in a publication called Farmers Bulletin, 1825, a document the government printed and handed out for free. Then, somewhere in the early 1970s, just as the commercial extermination business was getting big enough to matter, that bulletin slipped out of circulation and was never reissued in a form anyone would actually find. Here is the thing that almost nobody understands. The mixture itself was never the hard part. The hard part is when you apply it. Do it at the wrong moment and you have wasted your Saturday. Do it at the right moment and the entire colony collapses inside 9 days. The first time I sat down at a long pine table in an Amish home outside Millersburg, Ohio, I caught myself scanning the room for an aerosol can. There was not one anywhere. No sticky traps tucked into the corners. No bait stations crammed behind the appliances. No truck with a logo pulling into the drive every 90 days. Just a spotless kitchen, a spotless barn out back, and one brown bottle resting on a wooden ledge over the basin. Before we are finished here, you are going to walk away with 20 separate ways to put that bottle to work in the house you are standing in right now. Not some house you are planning to build. Not a renovation, the exact rooms you walked through tonight. You are also going to get the full recipe the USDA published in 1939 and then quietly buried in 1972. The same one the Amish never once set aside. All you need is the bottle, a glass jar, and roughly 60 minutes of a free weekend morning. So the obvious question is, why has this been kept from you all this time? That question is exactly what got under my skin. Let me tell you what turned me into a believer. For most of my adult life, I did this the way everyone does it. A quarterly service contract, $480 a year, billed like a utility. Glue boards laid out across the basement floor. Those little plastic bait boxes wedged behind the fridge where you forget they exist. And every single spring, right on schedule, the ants came pouring back through the identical seam in the threshold of the back door. Every autumn, the mice located the same opening behind the dryer vent that they used the year before. I was handing money to a trained professional to fight the same losing battle on a permanent loop. Last year, households in this country spent $6.5 billion trying to control pests. $6.5 billion. And even after all that, 84% of them said they still ran into a pest problem within the last 12 months. That is not a service you are buying. That is a monthly fee for a problem that is engineered never to end. Here is what those Amish families across Lancaster County and Holmes County worked out long before any of us were born. You do not have to obliterate the nest in one dramatic strike. You have to do 3 separate things, and you have to do them in the correct sequence. You take out the ones moving in the open. You destroy the eggs and the larvae the adults tucked away before you arrived. And you wipe out the chemical trails the survivors depend on to find their way around your home. 3% hydrogen peroxide handles every one of those jobs. It oxidizes the soft tissue of an insect the moment it makes contact. It works its way into egg casings and ends the next generation before it ever breaks open. And it dissolves the pheromone pathways that ants, roaches, and even mice lean on to navigate. Let me walk you through how that actually unfolds with the pest most of you are fighting tonight, the cockroach. When one of them strolls across your counter in broad daylight, understand what you are really looking at. That is not a lone roach that wandered in. That is the spillover from a population packed inside your wall cavities, beneath your appliances, behind the back panel of your dishwasher. For each one that shows itself, there are somewhere between 30 and 50 you will never lay eyes on. So you do not waste energy stomping after the ones you can see. You build the ambush they march straight into. Combine 1 cup of 3% hydrogen peroxide with 1 cup of water and a single teaspoon of basic dish soap inside a spray bottle. The soap is not optional, and here is why. A roach is sheathed in a waxy outer shell, and without the soap to cut the surface tension, the peroxide simply rolls off in beads and drips to the floor. Add the soap, and it clings instead. It seeps in. It floods the spiracles, those tiny breathing ports running down the sides of the body, and the roach drowns on dry land within a couple of minutes. Hit every roach you spot directly, then go after the seam behind the refrigerator, the canyon between the stove and the cabinet, the hinge along the dishwasher door, those little drainage holes at the back of the lower cabinets, the dark underside of the sink trap. Those are the roads they travel. Do it once the lights are off, because that is the hour roaches move. Run the routine again every 3rd night for a full 2 weeks. By the 9th night, the counter parades stop. By the 14th night, the egg cases, those little chestnut-colored capsules they leave behind in the corners, will have opened, and the young will have crawled across the film you laid down and died before they ever reached a crumb. 1 bottle, $1. That is the exact outcome your $300 quarterly visit keeps swinging at and missing. And let me say something about why the timing matters so much with roaches specifically, because this is where most people give up too early and decide the whole thing is a myth. A female German cockroach carries her egg case, the technical word for it is an ootheca, attached to her body for weeks before the young emerge, and a single one of those capsules holds somewhere between 30 and 40 eggs. If you spray hard for 3 nights and then quit because you stopped seeing adults, you have done nothing about the next wave still sealed inside those capsules in the dark. That is the trap. That is why the people who try this once and shrug walk away convinced it failed. The peroxide film you lay down on night 1 is not really for the roach you killed on night 1. It is for the nymph that hatches on night 11 and crawls across that exact patch of residue on its way to the food it has never tasted yet. You are not fighting the roaches you can see. You are setting a chemical minefield for the generation that has not been born. Hold the line for the full 14 nights, and the math turns against the colony in a way no single aerosol blast ever could. But this is barely scratching what that brown bottle is capable of. Once the underlying idea clicks for you, that oxidation destroys soft tissue, that soap makes it grip, that repeating the cycle severs the life cycle, you can turn it loose on every creature in the building. And there is a genuine reason this was taken from you. A reason your grandfather operated on instinct here, and you are starting from zero. I will lay that reason out in a few minutes. First, let me bring up ants. Because with ants, the biology gets honestly bizarre. There is research that ran in the journal Evolution, where scientists offered ants a honey mixture laced with hydrogen peroxide. The healthy ants steered clear of it. Their death rate climbed from 5% up to 20%. But when those same ants were carrying an infection from a parasitic fungus called Bovaria bassiana. The whole picture flipped. The sick ants deliberately went for the peroxide solution. They were dosing themselves with medicine. The fungus on its own killed 60% of them. With the peroxide, that number fell to 45. The ants understood the dosage. They wrote their own prescription. So what does any of that have to do with your floor? It means hydrogen peroxide is already wired into the chemical language of the ant world. Those scent trails, the invisible chemical highway they paint between the colony and your sugar dish, are built from organic compounds that fall apart under oxidation. When you spray 3% peroxide down the length of their procession, you are doing more than killing the ones in the puddle. You are deleting the map. The scouts that emerge at dawn cannot retrace the route home. The road is gone. Your kitchen has dropped off the network. Here is precisely how to run it. Hold off until the line of ants is plainly visible. Do not break it up yet. Study where it enters and where it leads. Then mix 3% peroxide and water in even amounts in your spray bottle. Coat the whole trail, from the point of entry all the way to whatever they are harvesting. Give it 10 minutes to sit. Wipe it down with a clean rag, then hit it a second time. Do this once each day across 4 days. The colony outdoors keeps dispatching scouts, but every scout that crosses your kitchen returns empty, with nothing to report. No trail, no message, no marching orders for the rest. Inside a week, the whole foraging operation reroutes to whoever lives next door. Before I move on, let me put the next 4 pests in your hands, because if bedbugs, fleas, fungus gnats, or pantry moths are what brought you here tonight, this stretch is going to keep somewhere between $200 and $1,200 in your pocket, depending on who you were about to dial. Bedbugs are the one almost everyone botches. People haul perfectly good mattresses to the curb. People write $1,500 checks to heat treatment outfits. People set off chemical foggers that only chase the bugs deeper into the wall cavities. None of that is required if you are willing to hold to a 3-week schedule. Pull the bed apart completely. Lift the mattress off the frame. Blend 1 cup of 3% peroxide, 1 cup of water, and a teaspoon of dish soap in your bottle. Mist every seam of that mattress, top and bottom. Hit every joint of the box spring. Get into every screw hole and every split in the frame. Treat the baseboards out to about 6 feet around the bed. Let everything dry fully before you dress the bed again. Then run it again every 4 days for 3 weeks straight. University extension work from the early 2000s recorded oxidative treatments holding up against bedbug populations when they were applied without fail. That phrase is the whole game, every time. A single spray accomplishes nothing. The 3-week rhythm works because bedbug eggs need 6 to 10 days to hatch. Your opening spray clears out the adults. The eggs you overlooked open into nymphs 4 days later, and your next pass catches them before they are old enough to breed. Fleas are next, and fleas live their real life in your carpet, not on your animal. The adult biting you is roughly 5% of the actual infestation. The other 95% is eggs, larvae, and pupae woven down into the carpet fibers and the cracks between your floorboards. So you treat the floor itself. Mix 1 cup of 3% peroxide, 1 cup of water, and 1 teaspoon of dish soap. Lightly mist the carpet across the rooms where your pet spends its time. Do not soak it down to the backing. A fine, even coat is all you want. Let it dry, then vacuum thoroughly. Empty that canister into a bag you seal and carry outside immediately. The peroxide ruptures the larvae and oxidizes the eggs, and the vacuum lifts out the dead and the pupae you loosened. Repeat every 3 days for 2 weeks because the pupae are armored and ride out the first round. By the 2nd week, the hatching cycle is broken and the biting stops. Fungus gnats are the cloud of tiny black specks rising off your houseplant soil every time you water. They are not really a plant problem, they are a moisture problem, and their larvae are living in the top inch of the potting mix, eating root hairs. Mix 1 part 3% hydrogen peroxide with 4 parts water and pour it through the soil the way you would normally water. You will hear it fizz. That fizz is the oxygen tearing through the larvae. It does not harm the plant. In fact, the extra oxygen at the root zone tends to help it. Do this every time the top of the soil dries out for about 3 weeks, and the population dies off at the source. Pantry moths are the ones that ruin your flour and your cereal and leave webbing in the corners of the cupboard. Pull everything out of the pantry. Throw away anything already infested. You cannot save it. Then wipe down every shelf, every corner, and every crack with a 50-50 mix of 3% peroxide and water. Pay attention to the lip under the shelf edge and the screw holes in the shelf brackets, because that is where the EGGS sit. Let it dry and store everything that comes back in sealed glass or hard plastic from now on. The moths cannot chew through glass, and with the eggs in the cracks oxidized, there is nothing left to start the next generation. Now I want to give you the mouse, because the mouse is where people assume peroxide cannot possibly help, and they are wrong. You are not going to spray a mouse to death. What you are going to do is erase the thing a mouse needs more than food, which is its scent map. A mouse navigates your house along walls and edges using its own urine and body oils as a guidance system. It runs the same routes night after night because the smell tells it those routes are safe. Take a 50-50 mix of 3% peroxide and water and wipe down every baseboard run, every gap they squeeze through, the back of the dryer, the pipe penetrations under the sink, the corners of the basement. You are scrubbing out the chemical signposts. A mouse that loses its map in your house becomes a nervous, exposed animal in unfamiliar territory, and it relocates somewhere it can read the walls again. Pair that with sealing the actual entry holes with steel wool packed tight and a dab of peroxide, and you have closed the door behind it. And here is a detail about mice that the trap companies would rather you never connected. A mouse does not see well. Its whole world is built out of smell and touch. The brush of its whiskers against a wall, and the scent it left behind the last time it ran that path. That is why a mouse hugs the baseboard instead of crossing open floor, and it is why a single mouse will use the same 6-inch gap behind your dryer vent every night for months. The trail is the animal's memory, written in chemistry, and when you wipe that chemistry away, you are not just cleaning a wall, you are erasing the mouse's recollection of where it is safe to be. Without that map, it cannot tell your kitchen apart from open ground, and a mouse in open ground that it cannot read is an animal looking for the exit. The exterminator will sell you a dozen snap traps and a season of bait. The brown bottle and a wad of steel wool make the house stop telling the mouse it belongs there in the first place. Let me keep moving, because the bottle does not stop at 5 or 6 pests. Spider mites on your indoor plants come off with a 1 to 4 peroxide and water spray on the undersides of the leaves, repeated every 4 days. Silverfish in the bathroom and the bookshelves die when you wipe their humid hiding spots behind the toilet tank, under the sink, and along the baseboards in damp rooms with a 50-50 solution, and then knock down the humidity that drew them. Earwigs that crawl in around the foundation get a peroxide and water perimeter wipe along the door thresholds and the basement window wells. Carpet beetles, the little oval bugs chewing holes in your wool and your stored clothing, die at the larval stage when you miss the closet floor and the storage bins with the soap and peroxide mix, and then vacuum. Drain flies breeding in the gunk inside your sink, and shower drains get flushed out when you pour straight 3% peroxide down the drain at night and let it foam through the slime they are laying eggs in. Do that 3 nights running, and the drain goes quiet. Then there are the outdoor invaders that come in seasonally. Box elder bugs and stink bugs clustering on the warm side of the house in fall. Get a peroxide and soap spray directly, and a wiped perimeter on the window frames and the siding seams where they push through. Wasps starting a small nest under your eave can be hit at dusk with a strong peroxide and soap stream when they are sluggish and clustered. Though I will tell you plainly, a large established nest is a job for somebody with the right gear, not a brown bottle. Aphids riding in on cut flowers and houseplants, wipe off the stems with a 1 to 4 spray. Mold mites in a damp basement or a forgotten cabinet die when you treat the surface mold itself with 3% hydrogen peroxide because you are killing their food and them in the same pass. And that brings the count to 20 different pests, every one of them answered by the same brown bottle that has been sitting in your cabinet doing nothing but disinfecting the occasional scraped knee. So now we arrive at the part that genuinely made me angry once I understood it. Why did this disappear? Why did a free federal document that laid all of this out in plain language vanish from the shelves right when American homes needed it most? Start with the molecule itself. Hydrogen peroxide was first isolated by a French chemist named Louis-Jacques Thénard back in 1818. It has belonged to the public, to all of us, for more than 2 centuries. There is no patent. There is no formula somebody owns. You cannot construct a $3 billion recurring service industry on top of a compound that runs 97 cents at the dollar store and that any homeowner alive can apply in a quarter of an hour. The numbers simply refuse to add up, so the molecule gets shoved into the background. The 1939 bulletin gets quietly demoted to a microfiche reel in a federal archive down in College Park, Maryland. And by the time you get to 2005, you have 3 straight generations of homeowners who came up believing, deep in their bones, that handling a pest means calling a man in a uniform with a tank on his back and a clipboard in his hand. That is not some shadowy conspiracy in a back room. That is just what happens when there is money on one side of a fact and none on the other. Think about the structure of the business for a second. The whole model of a pest control contract rests on a single, quiet assumption that the homeowner cannot solve this themselves and has to keep paying someone who can. The day you can mix a quart of something in your own kitchen that does the same work, that assumption falls apart and the contract falls apart with it. So there is no advertising budget anywhere on earth pushing the brown bottle. No company sends a sales rep to your door to tell you about a 98-cent solution they cannot mark up and cannot bill you for monthly. The information has no sponsor. And in a world where almost everything you learn about a product arrives because somebody paid to put it in front of you, a fact with no sponsor behind it simply goes silent. It does not get suppressed by force. It just never gets repeated. And a thing that never gets repeated may as well not exist. That is the real mechanism here. And it is far more ordinary and far more effective than any villain in a boardroom. One critical thing before I hand you the master formula: several of the methods I have described and several in that old bulletin involve combining hydrogen peroxide with other ordinary household items. Baking soda, white vinegar, dish soap, powdered sugar, borax. So I need to be completely clear on a single point. Never, under any circumstances, mix hydrogen peroxide with concentrated bleach, with ammonia, or with any chlorine-based cleaner. Those reactions turn violent, and the fumes they throw off are genuinely dangerous. The old farmhouse rule covered this in one line. The peroxide belongs with the kitchen things, not with the laundry room things. If a product lives next to your detergent, keep it away from the brown bottle. If it lives next to your flour, it is almost certainly fine. Hold on to that one sentence and you will stay safe through every recipe here. Go open the cabinet under your sink tonight. Take an honest look at what is in there. Count the cans of store-bought pesticide, the ant stakes, the roach motels, the mouse bait trays, the boric acid jars, the citrus oil sprays they charge you $42 for. Tally up what all of it cost you. For most people watching this, that figure lands somewhere between $60 and $400. And a good half of those containers are sitting there half full, because none of them actually fixed the thing. Do not throw any of it out. Just see it for what it is, then walk over to the medicine cabinet and lift out the brown bottle. 4 generations. That is how long that recipe had been living in the Amish kitchen near Millersburg before I ever crossed the threshold. Everything I have ever covered on this channel is gathered in the description. That is the Amish home system. Now hold right here, because what I am about to give you is the exact thing Farmers Bulletin 1825 spelled out in 1939. The thing the Amish kept mixing without interruption, and the thing that costs you somewhere under $1.20 to make. Pulled out of federal circulation for more than 50 years. Here is the finale you came for. The formula from Bulletin 1825 that the USDA, in its own words, called the Universal Household Preparation. It sat in the back of the bulletin under a heading marked General Application. It was put forward for nearly every common pest you would find indoors. The people who wrote it noted that rural families across the Pennsylvania Dutch country and the Ohio Amish settlements had already been mixing something close to it for at least 3 generations before the government ever printed a word about it. Here is the recipe, exactly as it reads. 2 cups of 3% hydrogen peroxide, 1 cup of warm water, 1 tablespoon of plain liquid Castile soap or an unscented dish soap, 1 tablespoon of ordinary table salt, 15 drops of clove essential oil, and then optional but worth doing, 1 teaspoon of cream of tartar. Combine it in a 1-quart spray bottle. Shake it before every use. Keep it out of direct sun in a cool cupboard. Make a fresh batch every 30 days because the peroxide breaks down over time. Let me tell you what each piece is doing and why the combination runs circles around peroxide on its own. The peroxide oxidizes the soft tissue of the insect and wrecks the eggs and the scent trails. The water knocks it down to a strength that will not stain your finished surfaces. The soap shatters the surface tension so the spray soaks into the waxy armor on roaches and ants and bedbugs. The salt is the ingredient that honestly caught me off guard. Salt pulls the moisture out of soft-bodied insects on contact, and it stays behind as a dry barrier long after the peroxide has flashed off, which stretches the killing window from a few minutes out to several days. The clove oil carries eugenol, a compound the EPA files under minimum risk because of how safe it is around people, but which is well documented as a contact poison to insects. And the cream of tartar, potassium bitartrate, if you want the formal name, is what ties the chemistry together. It works as a gentle acid that steadies the peroxide in the mix and helps the salt dissolve more evenly, so the spray dries down to a smooth residue instead of crusting up in clumps. How do you put it to work? 3 ways. For pests, you can see the roach on the counter, the ants on the floor, the fleas in the rug. Spray them down until they are wet, wait 15 minutes, then wipe clean. For the entry points and the travel routes, the baseboards, the door thresholds, the dryer vents, the basement window wells, the spots where pipes punch through the wall, spray once a week through the first month and then once a month after that for upkeep. That second application is the one that breaks the cycle for an entire season. For the nests and the hiding spots, under the fridge, behind the stove, inside the hollow of a cabinet, down in the splits of the bed frame, soak a cotton ball, set it into the void, and walk away. The clove vapor and the salt residue keep working in there for up to a week. The whole quart costs you under $1.20 to mix. The same amount of coverage off a store shelf runs you somewhere between $12 and $35, and the store product is spent after one go. This batch lasts a month and covers your entire house. This is what was sitting on the ledge over the sink in that Amish kitchen near Millersburg. Not a glossy bottle, not a brand. A quart mason jar with a paper tag handwritten and tied around the neck with a length of twine. The handwriting belonged to a great-grandmother. The recipe was older than the house it was sitting in. The knowledge was always there. Somebody decided it was not for you to have. One community simply kept using it the entire time the rest of us forgot. Now it belongs to you again. You did not lose this because it quit working. You lost it because somebody holding a quarterly contract figured out how to bill you $480 a year for what a brown bottle and a mason jar handle for $1.20. If you are the sort of person who suspects that the plain, cheap answers were quietly pulled off the table to keep someone else's revenue flowing, then you already know your next move. Reach into the medicine cabinet, mix the formula, walk your whole house this weekend, hit the threshold, hit the dryer vent, hit the seam under the kitchen sink, and leave the rest of the batch in a quart jar right out on the shelf where it catches your eye every morning. Do one thing for me in the comments. Tell me which pest in your house tonight is the reason you clicked. Roaches, ants, mice, bedbugs, fleas, whatever it is, name it. I read all of them, and whichever pest comes up the most becomes the next full video I build. Send this to one person you know who is still cutting a check for a monthly contract. Just one. Because the minute they see what is in that brown bottle, the contract is finished. Subscribe, not because the number means anything to me, but because what we are doing here is bigger than a list of tips. We are dragging buried knowledge back into the light. One document, one method, one Amish kitchen at a time. The next one I am building is about a single spice off the baking aisle that cleared an entire rat invasion out of a Lancaster County root cellar in 14 days, with no snap traps, no bait boxes, and nobody in the house ever once finding a dead rodent. The spice costs $2.99 at any grocery store in the country. You very likely have it in your cabinet at this moment. And the reason it works comes down to a specific enzyme that rats simply cannot produce, which I will walk you through completely when that one drops. You came here tonight because you hit a light switch and caught something moving. You are walking away with a federal document from 1939, a formula your great-grandmother very likely knew by heart, and a $1 bottle that does the job of a $300 service call. That is not a life hack. That is ground you just took back, and we are only getting started.